Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. We are jumping straight into a truly gripping story from the ancient text of the Mahabharata today. It's a tale packed with intense duty, absolutely overwhelming anxiety, and an impossible moral dilemma. We're looking at the story of the great ascetic Jaratkaru and his wife, who, by the way, happens to be the sister of the snake king Vasuki. It's a fascinating look at what happens when incredibly strict rules collide head-on with good intentions.
Here's how this is going to unfold. First, we'll examine the one-strike marriage rule. Then we hit the agonizing sunset dilemma. From there, we face the Rishi's wrath, listen to a desperate plea, and finally reach the prophecy fulfilled. These tragic chapters all build up to a crazy, high-stakes conflict at twilight.
Okay, so before we get into the weeds, I want you to literally put yourself in this situation. Imagine the visceral panic of knowing that one single tiny mistake could end your relationship and ruin your family forever. You're placed in a truly impossible situation. You're tiptoeing around, completely terrified. How would you even begin to handle that kind of pressure? Keep that feeling in the back of your mind as we explore what happens to our protagonist.
Section 1. The one-strike marriage rule. Let's see how this bizarre, high-stakes relationship actually gets set up. So, the ascetic Rishi Jaratkaru sets this extreme, frankly mind-boggling condition. The Snake King, Vasuki, offers his sister to Jaratkaru in marriage. Jaratkaru agrees, but he lays down the harshest ultimatum you could think of. He explicitly states that she must never say or do anything that goes against his liking. And his warning? He says if she does, he will immediately leave her and no longer stay in their house. One strike and he is gone forever. It's the ultimate zero-tolerance policy.
To actually survive this tense arrangement, the wife develops a hyper-vigilant devotion. The text describes her state of mind perfectly. She is grieving and highly anxious, but she's driven by a desire to do good for her relatives. So she attends to her husband with the wakefulness of a dog, the timidity of a deer, and the knowledge of science possessed by a crow. She is constantly on edge, reading every subtle cue in the room, absolutely terrified of making a single mistake.
Eventually, following her customary purification, she conceives a child. But, this isn't just any child. The source text describes the embryo as possessing massive energy, literally like a flame of fire, and growing like the moon in the bright fortnight. This incredible pregnancy just cranks the stakes up even higher. Because now, it's not just about her marriage anymore. It is about the future of this highly energetic child and her family's survival.
Section 2. The Sunset Dilemma. It is wild how fast a totally mundane afternoon turns into an absolute nightmare.
Picture this. Jaratkaru is completely fatigued. He places his head on his wife's lap and falls fast asleep. Sounds peaceful, right? But then, the sun begins to set behind the western mountain. The day is fading fast. The wife realizes he is about to miss the absolutely crucial time for his evening sacrifice and prayers to Vishnu. And suddenly, she's trapped. If she wakes him up, she risks his anger, and per their ironclad agreement, he leaves her forever. But if she lets him sleep, the twilight passes and he sustains a massive loss of religious virtue.
The crucial point here is her internal logic. She weighs these two terrible options carefully. She thinks to herself, he is exacting and punctilious in his religious duties. So she concludes that a virtuous man losing his virtue is actually the greater of the two evils. Gathering her courage, she speaks softly to him, waking him up to say the sun is setting and it's time to purify himself for evening prayer. She actively chooses to protect his spiritual merit, knowing full well it might cost her everything.
Section 3. The Rishi's Wrath. Let's look at the immediate fallout of that brave choice. The exact moment he wakes up, the husband just erupts. The text actually notes that his upper lip is quivering in anger. He completely disregards her gentle tone and her obvious good intentions. Instead, he tells her she has insulted him, and he instantly pulls the trigger on that harsh marriage contract. He says, "I shall no longer abide with thee, but shall go where I came from." He straight up refuses to hear her out, just strictly enforcing the literal rule they agreed upon.
And the reason for his anger reveals an unbelievable level of ascetic hubris. He tells her he firmly believes the sun has absolutely no power to set at its usual time if he is asleep. Talk about main character syndrome. His strict, unyielding pride totally blinds him to her very practical logic. He honestly believes the literal rules of nature have to bend to his personal virtue. Because she doubted that, he feels insulted, and an insulted person, he claims, should never stick around where the insult happened.
Section 4. a desperate plea. Let's see how she tries to reason with a guy who sees everything in absolute black and white.
Quaking with terror, pale with fear, and with words obstructed by tears, the wife mounts a highly strategic defense. She joins her hands and pleads with him. First, she clarifies her intent, saying she didn't wake him to insult him, but strictly to prevent the loss of his virtue. But then, she reveals the much deeper stakes. She explains she hasn't just been walking on eggshells for her own sake. Her family, the Naga race, is afflicted by a mother's curse. The entire welfare and salvation of her relatives depend completely on the offspring they produce. She begs him not to leave and make their connection fruitless before their child is safely assured.
Section 5. The prophecy fulfilled. Let's look at how this intense standoff actually resolves. Faced with this tearful, entirely logical plea, the great Rishi Jaratkaru gives a final, definitive statement. He validates her pregnancy, prophesying that the being she conceived is a highly virtuous soul, like Agni, the fire god himself, and will be a master of the Vedas. He basically gives her the peace of mind that her family's ultimate salvation is secure. But he doesn't stay. Having spoken no falsehood and remaining firmly fixed on his own path, he leaves her to go back to his severe penances. He keeps his word no matter how tragic the outcome.
And that leaves us with the core dilemma of today's explainer. Jaratkaru prioritized his absolute vow and his ascetic pride above absolutely everything else. His wife broke his rule, but she did it out of a deep, self-sacrificing devotion to his spiritual well-being and her family's survival. So it leaves us with a really profound question. In the end, whose definition of doing the right thing was actually correct? Is strict adherence to a rule more important than the compassionate, well-intentioned reason for breaking it? Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this one. I hope it leaves you with something powerful to chew on today.